Coalition crunch time. Political parties have just a few days left to form coalition governments in hung municipalities. The talks have been filled with ultimatums and mistrust, with some parties accusing each other of negotiating in bad faith. Some have even refused to engage at all. So what can we expect in the little time that they have left? Political analyst Ralph Mathekga joins me now to weigh in on this. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I think, there's a coalition conundrum, if we can call it that, in the country at the moment. And there's also some deep-seated mistrust or lack of trust among political parties. And especially taking a look at Johannesburg, we have these 6 parties, the DA, the UDM, ACDP, COPE, and the Freedom Front Plus. And they've all, made a pact now to form a coalition and just to keep the ANC out. But the concern here now is that there is some drama unfolding when it comes to the mayoral role. Who's going to fill that? The DA now putting forward their candidate, Herman Mashaba also being in talks there to take over to be mayor of Johannesburg. But what do you expect is going to happen this week? And tomorrow is going to be that meeting that's going to be held to ultimately discuss who will be taking over the reins here in Johannesburg when it comes to that mayoral position. Are we having technical issues?
Thank you very much. Good morning to viewers at home. I think that the difficulty we're facing here is that the atmosphere that we are dealing with is not a favorable one for formation of solid coalitions. I mean, if we note, even before this election, there has never been any serious discussion among political parties before the elections about the possibility of coalitions. They were just talking past each other, and they found themselves in a position where they now have to put together coalitions. And the difficulty I'm seeing here is that each and every party that has got the potential to form this coalition seem to want to dominate. I mean, you can never have coalitions that are dominated by all coalition members. The manner in which parties are approaching this thing shows that they are not that close to reaching an agreement. I think, however, that as the deadline looms, as we are getting closer, parties are going to be more realistic. I do think that when it comes to cities such as Johannesburg, when it comes to cities such as Tshwane, I do think the stakes are quite high. The difficulty is just that you look at Tshwane, you look at Johannesburg, you look at Ekurhuleni, there seems to be a principle among coalition partners or potential coalition partners that if you give me something in Tshwane, you gotta get something in Johannesburg, and therefore in Ekurhuleni, resulting in these talks becoming so complex because it is so difficult to get a perfect agreement across these 3 metros that satisfy all coalition partners. I think, however, as they get closer to the deadline, they are going to realize the reality that they are vulnerable as political parties. They better work towards something. And I think that there's still a few days. There is a possibility, I believe. I don't want to be cynical here. I believe that there is a realization within these political parties that going for election rerun might expose them. And I think that as the time gets closer, they are going to have to work out something. But the mistrust will prevail throughout this coalition, even after they have been established.
Now, the UDM leader, Bantu Holomisa, and the Freedom Front Plus also said that, they think the DA is being arrogant, or that's what was the words of Holomisa, saying the DA is arrogant regarding this whole situation. Freedom Front Plus saying that they, are against the DA's decision to put forward their own candidate for mayor here in Johannesburg. So, are you agreeing with that statement? Is the DA just playing hardball and they are being arrogant for no apparent reason? Or do you think there is a reason behind their antics?
The DA brings a lot of experience into this. I mean, it is the only party that has actually successfully run coalitions. They've done it in the Western Cape. But there is something very interesting as well about how they went about it. I mean, in the first place, the DA seems to do well in the coalitions that they can actually dominate. What that means is that they will start a coalition. Eventually, the ultimate goal end up being to swallow other coalition partners, and the DA can therefore prevail within this. And other small parties are seeing through this, and they want much more equitable say as to where coalitions are going. And I think this is why you are seeing parties such as Action South Africa, you are seeing parties such as your Freedom Front Plus being much more resilient in their position, not really moving very much, being quite confrontational to the DA, actually almost saying to the DA that, look, you also couldn't win elections outright. Therefore, you are supposed to come down and negotiate with us here. You cannot come with conditions that create the impression that you are going to prevail, you are going to dominate this coalition. It is up to the DA. I think they have a great deal of experience. I also think they can humble themselves. They can look at the long-term goals of working with these parties. And if you look at where the DA is going, in my view, it is going to have to govern through minority coalitions. So they will have to learn to live within with those small parties without necessarily trying to overwhelm them and dominate them. But at the same time as well, the small parties as well, they do have their own ambitions as well. Some of them are sitting at above 10%. They are trying to maximize out of that. They are trying to throw ultimatums. It is just a tense political environment whereby reaching a consensus on coalition is going to be difficult. I think parties should stay away from the idea of grand coalition, of a single coalition agreeing on Tshwane, Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni. I think they should focus on one municipality at a time. In that way, I think we can start to see parties moving in a better direction.
Now, let's talk about the ANC here. I mean, we can't look past the fact that the ANC, they do have a lot of advantages that they also bring to the table. I mean, as it has the numbers to form coalition governments easily, but potential coalition suitors might see the ANC as a liability like we've seen now recently. But why do you think that is?
I think that the ANC has a lot to explain when it comes to what happened in local government so far. It is the party that has dominated the sphere of local government since the first local government election in 1996. So as a potential coalition partner to the ANC, the party has got a lot to explain. You also think of, am I going to inherit that problem? And that is why you look at the ANC, numerically, they are in a very good position, no doubt about it. They've got the good numbers. It means that numerically, when it comes to adding up, they are in a better position to form and even dominate those coalitions. But morally speaking, this is where the problem is. Morally, I think opposition parties are considering what it means to be in coalition with the ANC. And I think it also goes beyond the ANC. I've had talks among opposition parties thinking about no-go areas when it comes to potential coalition suitors here. There are one or two parties that have come out as no-go area, the ANC being one of them, being labeled. Some will identify the EFF to say we will never work with the EFF. All of these are demonstrating, I think, the fear of association that some of the parties that have performed relatively better in this election, newer small parties, they don't want that performance to be tainted by this power agreement with parties that they believe will not make any difference. Equally so as well, we are talking about smaller parties here that are sitting at very lower margin. At some point, they will also need to realize that they need to consider what is being given to them. They might not be in a position to get exactly what they want because numerically, they are not in a good position. They might think of themselves being morally in a position to influence this coalition, but in terms of the vote, it's another story. This is the challenge with this election where I believe the voters have just thrown the vote all over the place, not trusting a single party.
Thank you so much. That was political analyst Ralph Mathekga weighing in on the ongoing talks between parties to form coalition governments.